Welcome to the show, everybody. Mike with CoronavirusDiaries, and today I'm fortunate enough to be able to reconnect with Luke Richmond, an author and a adventurer or a world explorer. Luke, how you doing?
Yeah, really good, mate. Really good. How you been?
I've been staying busy, and sounds like you have been yourself. You've mentioned just before we started recording, you got a new adventure that you're getting ready to kick in. Would you mind jumping into that a little bit? What's this? What's this new adventure you got?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've all been on lockdown because of, COVID-19 for a while. So we've just been improving the house and building big sheds and doing all that stuff. But now the state borders are opening up. They've just opened up again this week. So I've just launched a adventure that my wife and I have been planning for a while that we've wanted to just do at some stage, which was to ride bicycles across Australia. Which is quite a distance. So we're going to fly up to the most northern town, sort of in central Australia, called Darwin, which is at the top of the Northern Territory on the coast. And up there, it's about 35 degrees in the daytime, even in winter. So we're in winter at the moment, and it's 2 degrees down here in Tasmania, which is the bottom southeast of Australia, but it's still 35 degrees up there. So we're going to fly up there and start a cycle and try and get all the way home here to Tasmania. So that's starting next month.
And you're talking in Celsius, correct?
Celsius, yeah.
Yeah. So
Sorry.
for us in the States, it's a little bit different. What's the time frame as far as the distance and the travel time, and how are you trying to execute this? Are you going to be packing stuff and camping along the way, or what's the plan?
So we bought a couple of steel frame mountain bikes and just got some panniers and a few handlebar bags and stuff loaded on. Now, we aren't cyclists. We haven't done much training on bikes or cycled much at all. So we're just going to take it very steady. The distance is about 4,200 kilometers of actual cycling to do, with a bit of a ferry in the middle to get from mainland Australia to Tasmania. There's a bit of water, so we'll catch a ferry there. And I think we're just going to start with maybe a 50-kilometer day and then just see how the butts and legs are feeling. Sure. Maybe next day do 60, maybe have a day off. We're just going to just see how the body reacts and maybe get to an average of 80 to 100 kilometers a day. And if we can do that, it'll take us a couple of months. So it'll be good.
That sounds incredible. You're going to be doing any sort of live streams, or any sort of fan base is able to stay in contact with you while you're doing it, or how is that going to work?
Yeah, we'll do as much as we can, as always. We'll shoot GoPro footage and all that type of stuff to put out a little video at the end of the expedition. And along the way, we'll do as much posting and Insta stories and stuff as we can, but it's fairly remote. Once we leave Darwin and go through a couple of smaller towns of Catherine and Alice Springs, then you've just got vast distances of desert, tiny communities, little pubs and roadhouses, pretty much all the way until you get to South Australia, right at the bottom. So it'll be intermittent, but we'll get out as much as we can.
Sure. So how are you planning food and hydration and stuff? Are you going to be stopping at any businesses on the way, or are you packing rations and stuff? How hunting rabbits? I don't know.
We'll do a little bit of both. Probably no hunting on this one, but the biggest distance between a roadhouse, so what would you guys call them, service stations,
sure,
where you can get a bit of a feed and fuel and stuff, is about 300 kilometers is the biggest distance. So, that's a couple of nights, maybe 3 nights of camping in between, and we can carry enough food and water on the bikes for those distances, and then resupply at the roadhouses and the little towns along the way. And I guess the reason we want to get it going next month, straight away as the borders open, is because it'll be one of the rare times in Australia where you can see some of our iconic landmarks like Ayers Rock, the national parks, Devil's Marbles, all these famous places where there's going to be no tourists. It's just going to be just locals checking it out. So that'll be a beautiful time to go.
Certainly. So right now it's the state borders within Australia are open, but international, they're still doing quarantine for a couple of weeks when people come into the country, and it's kind of hit and miss even getting in, it sounds like.
Yeah, well, Australia's got a hard international border, so only Australian residents can come home. But even that, they've limited to, I think it's only about 400 a day or maybe a week actually allowed to come in, because then you have to go into hotel quarantine, and they're going to start to make those people returning home pay for their own quarantine as well in the hotels.
Wow.
Australia's pretty hard line with all this stuff, hey? Now, whether in the long term that's going to be for our benefit or not, we're not sure. But we went very hard on the lockdown,
Sure.
and nearly all the states have, eradicated the virus. Whether it's there or not, we're not sure. But it's not in a lot of the states. But one of them has just had an outbreak again. Now the government's reaction to that is to lock down that state. So the whole of Victoria now has hard border, which has been sort of enforced by the Australian Defence Force, police. Every border in and out of that state's been blocked, and you have to have paperwork to say why you're traveling, sort of thing.
Sure.
And they're hoping to suppress the virus again in that state before they allow it to open. So, we're going real hard on this stuff. Whether it's just going to be a few years of this yo-yo effect of going hard and easing off and going hard and easing off, and it's going to hurt us in the long run, we don't know. But that's sort of the policy at the moment here. I'm not sure what you guys are doing. You guys are opening up again?
Within the states, at least the lower 48, it's kind of every state has their own kind of regulations in place. Some of them have opened wide up. It's really divisive right now, as you can imagine.
Okay.
There is a lot of this discussion of like surges happening, but there's a lot of controversy over like, what does that really mean? Because there is more testing now. There's some information that's coming out now that's really, to be quite honest, sketchy in terms of how states, and maybe I'm not sure if it's federal, but I know for state-wise, there's a video of a lead health personality of sorts from Illinois, which is the state that Chicago's in, giving a presentation to journalists, and they're discussing COVID. And one of the journalists asks, about a teenager that had recently passed from COVID and whether or not they had pre-existing conditions. And I'm sure you can find the video. It's something along the lines of, what constitutes a COVID-19 death, and they come back and they literally say, it's a simple definition suggesting that at the time of death, if they test positive for COVID, they put it in a pool of COVID death. And then they further ask the question, well, does that mean like if you're in a car accident? And they said, well, yeah, actually. So this is where it gets sketchy. Is the lady specifically states, who's, she's a government employee, that the definition per their state anyway, is that even if you're in like hospice care, like a long-term care facility for elderly, you have a pre-existing condition where they tell you you're going to pass or die in 3 weeks. And then within that 3 weeks, you catch COVID and then you die of whatever it was that you were going to die of, they will still then categorize it as a COVID death. So it makes you look at the numbers, and myself included have started to question a lot of what is really happening right now. And, it's not that I don't think it's real, because there are hospitals. I do have friends that are in healthcare that, they're suggesting that, yes, in fact, there is still a steady stream of COVID patients. I actually just had a friend that one of their friends came up from Texas, which is now considered a hot spot in the States. And they had been sick, really sick for a week, someone roughly the same age, mid-30s. And they had tested positive for COVID. They phoned up and told everybody that they hung out with after they went back to Texas, because it's kind of crazy that they just had to travel.
It's a crazy time, isn't it? I mean, I guess our government's so hardline on it that if there's just one single case or a small cluster of 10 or 12, they're actually just they're shutting shit down. We actually had some poor buggers in a sort of housing estate in Melbourne, where there's a few thousand residents, usually the poorer demographic of the city get housing given to them, but they're just very tiny units in huge big high rises. They had a small cluster in there, so the government actually, with half an hour notice, put 500 cops around the building, no one in or out, locked down, can't go anywhere until everyone gets tested. So they're going real hard on this stuff. So when that type of policy relates back to our adventure when we start, I know we can fly up there at the moment, but we might be starting and then get stuck at a border for quite some time. We're not sure yet, but we're just gonna be here doing improvements and all that stuff for so long. It's time to get some adventure going and then get back here later on whenever we do.
So I'm not entirely sure the structure of Australia and the way the states or is it states or provinces?
Yeah, all states, yeah.
Okay, so the states, if you're headed south, if you hit a hard border, what would a detour entail? Like how many extra hundreds or thousand kilometer, is
Well,
that
that
even
that
feasible?
that can really depend, because in the Northern Territory, there's literally only a really north-south highway and a few branching off highways. If you hit a hard border in the south, you might have to actually detour 1,000+ kilometers to get to a highway heading east, or you can't really go west. From the Northern Territory, going west means hitting some of the worst dirt roads you've ever seen and traveling thousands of kilometers into the desert. So you can't really go west. East, you could hit some highways, but they are a big, big detour. So we'll have to have a little bit of forward thinking when we start leaving the very center. So Uluru, like Big Ayers Rock, you would have seen the big red rock in the middle of Australia.
Sure.
When we leave there and head south, there's not a lot. So we'll have to plan that leg a bit carefully, and just depends on what's happening with Australia and trying to predict the very reactionary government that we have at the moment. So yeah, we'll see how we go. It's going to be fun either way. You know, we'll get out in the bush and hang out.
Yeah. And based on your background, it's, you know, being able to pivot and, you know, problem solve is something that comes with the territory, correct?
100%, mate. And yeah, it's exactly how you said it. When all this stuff hit, I was planning book tours and a couple of international expeditions. All that got squashed. So then we're put this little business plan in place where we're building a big shed and going to launch a gym in there for our local community. So that started off, and, you know, we're watching YouTube and trying to figure out how to do all this home improvement sort of stuff and build sheds and whatnot. And then once the borders open, we'll do an adventure. Then we'll come back and keep cracking on with the shed building and the business side of things. So yeah, very just be, you know, able to adapt.
For sure. You know, we were talking about would you consider yourself a homesteader? Like where you're at right now with what you're doing? Do you have, I mean, you've got gardens out there. You have plans for any goats or anything like that?
We bought this place like quite cheap. It's 25 acres of just bush here in Tasmania, but it's beautiful. But the house was, you know, a little bit derelict, so I've had to put, you know, a year of sort of home improvements into that. And it's probably got another year on it before it's, you know, level and stable and everything's feeling good and looking good. But yeah, we've put veggies in. We've got chickens out the back now. We had a goat at one stage, but she was pretty annoying, so we gave that to another farmer.
I thought you were going to say you had dinner.
I believe my wife wouldn't let me eat it, so we had to give that one up. Yeah, we're doing little bits, mate. We're doing little bits, but we're not builders. We're just learning as we go. Yeah, good old YouTube. We'll check out some things like how to do a job. And one of the things I'm doing at the moment, because our community is quite small, but you sort of know everybody, is if I need to figure out how to do a job, I might go and volunteer my time with a builder or a landscaper or a tree lopper just to figure out how to do it safely, combined with a bit of YouTube, and then do the job myself.
Yeah, it's brilliant. You know, it's it just seems like going back in the ages, right, where there's more of a barter system involved. You know, you're bartering time for an education. It's like an apprenticeship of sorts. It seems like something that's almost lost in modern days, especially in the States. It's not something you hear of very often. So when you mentioned that earlier, I was just like, man, that's incredible. It's, you know, I'm doing some of my own homework or housework at families, and, you know, YouTube is great, but to be able to get on the job training, like you're saying, you're learning how to use, you know, chainsaws safely, and you know,
like you go to YouTube and this is how you use a big chainsaw. But then you actually get the chainsaw and you're looking at it, you go, oh man, this is a fucking scary piece of kit.
chainsaw.
You know, so yeah, when you go and so I'll volunteer my time with a landscaper, and he's showing me how to actually use them safely. But then all the little tips and tricks how to fell a tree safely. You know, you watch YouTube, but they're not telling you those 20 years of lessons that they've learned to make sure you do it safely, and all the variables in trees and limbs and everything else.
Yeah.
So I was doing that, and he was just a legend guy. And now I do half a day's work with him every week, actually paid, just because he needs a hand, and I'll take some money, you know, cash for sure. But then when we come to do the business, and we need to put up this massive shed, to get these big kit sheds erected, the company was going to charge like an extra $18,000. And we don't have that sort of money at all, you know. So I said to the guy, mate, I really want the kit, but I just can't afford the shed. Would you mind if I just like work for you on a few different jobs just to learn, and then I can put up my own shed? And he sort of was taken back a little bit, but then he said, yeah, sure, like come on in. So I did a couple of jobs with these guys, learning how to put the sheds up. And, you know, it's a bit of a system, but not common sense stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm going to save myself 18 grand. But then at the end of it, he actually offered me, mate, do you want to come and like do a job? Like, do you want a job? And I was like, nah, not really. I just wanted to learn how to do it.
Your work must have been speaking for itself if they're trying to onboard you. What the building that you're building, that's your gym that you're putting out there. How big is your gym that you're trying to put up?
It's 200 square meters. So what's that for you guys? Use your own feet. So I guess
900 or 600 feet.
Yeah, so it's pretty big. So it's like 20 meters. So what's that? 60 feet by 30 feet. Big rectangle thing, big shed. So it's quite large.
Wow.
And I've had to drop a few big trees and clear the land.
3 feet per meter, roughly. 3 feet per meter.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And then do a big concrete slab, big shed. And then, you know, I guess it's this thing. It's all about timing, isn't it? So because of COVID-19 and our government's really tough stand on lockdowns, you know, it's put a lot of businesses out of business, especially in the gym, fitness, CrossFit type sector.
Sure.
So then there's a huge influx of gym equipment on the market, which, you know, for us, when we're setting up a gym, ended up being a good thing. So we've got a whole gym set up for, you know, just cents on the dollar.
So that brings up a really interesting thought is timing and timing when you do stuff. And we were talking before this about the housing market here in the States and buyer's market, seller's market. How did you know when it was time for you to go after this gym? Had you decided that pre-COVID, or was it something that once COVID hit, you're like, you know what, we're going to do this now?
Yeah, well, it was always in there at some stage that we wanted to do our own gym on the land down here. But it was sort of out of reach because it's almost $100,000 project from start to finish, you know. But then when COVID hit, the government changed a lot of laws. So in Australia, we have what's called superannuation, which you pay into your whole life as part of your wages, and then that gets paid back to you as your
like
pension.
Social Security in the States. Social
Security, yeah. So once COVID hit, the government allowed you access to that, which has never been done before. So we could dip into that and get a big chunk of that investment capital out of our own money. So we did that. So that would never have come along without COVID. Wow. So then we had the seed money to start. And then everything else just sort of fell into place with the shed guys letting me work for them, and then the gym equipment being very cheap. So it's all just about timing, mate. But I guess with this as well, I've got a history of running gyms in my past. So it's not like something that was totally foreign. So you had that skill set you could call on and then just run with it.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Curious with the finances that you were able to pull out early, was there heavy tax or anything involved in that, or?
Tax-free. So this was part of the government's stimulus package. You know, as soon as COVID hit and they shut down the whole country, they pumped out a little bit of stimulus, but also allowed you access to this slush fund of almost $1 trillion of pension money that's sitting there, you know. And my wife and I are in this sort of life choice where we don't rely on pension anyway. We just create the life we want to live. Like, we don't actually work in a sense now, and we're only in our 30s. So we've sort of done away with that whole system anyway. So there wasn't a lot in there, but there was definitely enough to get the gym going.
Sure. That's outstanding. So when does your adventure kick off? Is there a hard date?
3 weeks time, we are flying north to Queensland. We're just going to stop off there for a couple of weeks and then fly north again on the 13th. So about 5 weeks time, we'll be starting.
And how long was this in the making?
We've planned this for probably about 2 months, if that.
It's outstanding. And you're anticipating a few months on bikes ripping across the mainland.
Yeah.
So a previous adventure that you'd gone on, and one that was in your book, you had rowed across an ocean, and you had gone through a pretty significant physical transformation. Is there any type of a physical transformation you're anticipating from this?
100%, mate. Like, whenever you go from sort of the life we're living at the moment, you're sleeping 9 hours, you're eating good, training well every day, to even just cycling 80 to 100 kilometers a day, which to a cyclist won't be a lot, but to like a general punter like myself and my wife, it's a hell of a lot. So you're putting out so much more energy every day. You're not eating the same food. You won't be sleeping as well because you're camping on the side of a dirt track. So I can predict easily probably a 10K or 15 kilogram weight drop because I'm up about 95 kilograms at the moment, which is quite heavy for me. So I'll definitely come back lean, mean, fighting machine again. And but then the gym will be ready to rock and we can get back to action.
Sure. Is there anything that you and your wife discuss in terms of like just safety and security along the way? I mean, there's going to be two of you. You guys are looking out for each other, but there's just two of you, and you're going to be out in the dark in the middle of nowhere, you know, for months. Is there anything that you go into with like this?
Yeah, that comes with the territory. I mean, you're an ex-military guy, I'm an ex-military guy, so you've already got these brains that have figured out 10 different SOPs and actions on in case stuff happens. And, you know, I do carry just a couple of hand weapons with me, no firearms or anything, just a couple of what-if scenario weapons.
Sure.
But then it's just about being that street smart as you're going along, you know. You always get to like at least 40, 50 Ks outside of a town to avoid that drunken drive-by type scenario. You
Sure.
get well off the road. We're sort of bivouacking out, so we're not using tents, but he's using an old hoochie style, you know, swags on the ground, so keep it low.
Yeah.
You know, all those old drills just to avoid that scenario where something could escalate into a serious problem.
Sure.
Is always the best way to go.
Wow. Well, Luke, it sounds like you've got your work cut out for you, and I'm going to be interested to hear, you know, how this transpires, how it goes. We'll have to get at least one more of these in before you take off, because obviously you're going to be other things on your mind for a few months.
Maybe we try and get one in when we're in the middle of Australia or up in the desert country somewhere. If we get a link up, we'll have a chat.
Brother, that would be incredible. And I would want nothing more than to have that experience. It would be incredible. So was there anything that you were hoping to touch base on before I let you get back to your day?
No, mate, just great chatting to you and getting the insight from the other side of the planet and see how everyone's reacting and changing to this new world we've found ourselves in, mate.
It is an interesting one indeed. To all viewers and listeners, all the information on Luke can be found below in the About section. Definitely check it out. A couple of books that he's got, and then check out his social media. You'll be able to follow along on these adventures that he's got going with him and his wife this time. So thanks again, Luke. It's always a pleasure and much appreciated.